In the faded pages of colonial Mexican court records, a darkness lurks. Between 1550 and 1750, at least 7 documented cases tell the same haunting story. Indigenous women, abandoned and desperate, drowning their own children in rivers and lakes after Spanish fathers vanished from their lives. What followed was perhaps more chilling. Reports of unearthly wailing echoing across those same waterways night after night. This isn't mere folklore born from campfire whispers. This is history, a bloody stain seeping through official documents. Even more unsettling, the earliest reference to a weeping woman appears in the Florentine Codex from the 1570s, describing a supernatural harbinger in pre-conquest Tenochtitlan in 1509, a ghostly woman crying for her children before catastrophe struck the Aztec Empire. Did ancient prophecy somehow manifest in colonial tragedy? Or did real-world horrors breathe life into a dormant ancient fear? Tonight, we wade into waters where history drowns in legend, where the boundary between documented atrocity and supernatural terror dissolves before our eyes. Centuries before Spanish ships cast their shadow over Mexican shores, the Aztecs whispered tales of a weeping woman haunting waterways. The Florentine Codex preserves an account from 1509, a supernatural feminine figure drifting through Tenochtitlan's canals in the dead of night, her cries a knife through silence. "My children, where shall I take you?" This wasn't just any spirit, but Suicidal, the serpent woman, goddess of childbirth who embodied life's most terrible contradiction. With one hand, she delivered infants safely into the world. With the other, she collected the souls of women who died in labor. Near lakes and rivers, she wandered, her wails both blessing and warning. But what happens when conquerors rewrite a goddess? When Spanish missionaries arrived, they didn't just claim land and gold. They colonized mythology itself. Like a surgeon's cruel blade, they excised Suicodal's protective aspects, leaving only her mourning, her loss, her dread. Archaeological evidence shows this transformation happened with horrifying speed. Court documents from 1550s Mexico City reveal indigenous testimonies about a crying woman by the water, but Spanish scribes twisted these accounts, recording them as demonic apparitions. A maternal protector was methodically transformed into a harbinger of death. The water remained constant, explaining why no one, even today, feels safe near rivers or lakes after dark in these regions. What waits there isn't just memory or myth. It's something older, something changed, something watching from beneath the surface. In Mexico City, 1643. Court scribes document the trial of Juana, a mestiza woman. Their quills scratch across parchment, recording her confession in clinical detail. She led her 2 young children to a canal at dusk, held them beneath the water until their struggles ceased, then released them to the current. But what the scribes couldn't explain were the reports that followed. Night after night, Juana's wails echoed from the canal where her children died, even as she sat locked in her cell across town. This wasn't an isolated case. Colonial archives reveal at least 7 similar tragedies. Women who drowned their children in waterways after Spanish fathers abandoned them. Each case adds another layer to the emerging nightmare. These weren't mad women, as Spanish authorities claimed. They were servants, concubines, abandoned mistresses, women trapped in the lowest rungs of colonial society. When their Spanish lovers left, often for well-connected Spanish wives as they climbed the social ladder, these mothers faced a merciless choice. A 1681 case from Puebla describes a woman who, after drowning her infant, returned to the riverbank every night for weeks. Her wails so bone-chilling that neighbors barricaded their doors, convinced a supernatural entity had taken residence in the water. Their testimonies are perhaps the most disturbing element of all. In 1592, an indigenous woman named Maria told the court she drowned her child to prevent its sale into slavery by her Spanish employer. Another in 1667 claimed she killed her children because, after their father's abandonment, watching them slowly starve seemed more cruel than a quick death. the line between the living and the dead began to blur. In 1630, 3 Spanish merchants testified about hearing ghostly cries along a Veracruz riverbank, exactly where a servant had drowned her child the previous year. The woman had been executed months before, yet her cries persisted. Real women, real deaths, real bodies in the water. And something else, something that remained after justice was served, after graves were filled, after the living should have found peace. The name that would eventually define this terror, La Llorona, has roots in medieval Spain, where professional mourners called Lloronas were paid to transform grief into performance. These women weaponized wailing, their cries penetrating stone walls and hardened hearts alike at funerals. Unlike the supernatural figures they would inspire, these original Lloronas were flesh and blood. Yet they existed in that liminal space between life and death, between the mourners and the mourned. As this tradition crossed the Atlantic with Spanish ships, it mutated in the soil of the New World. In Spain's 1866 tale, El Pozo de la Llorona, a woman named Elvira drowns herself in a well after public humiliation, her spirit forever bound to the waters of her death. The elements are there: water, shame, a woman's rage transformed into eternal haunting. But something far darker was brewing in Mexico. The mourning tradition wasn't just imported, it was infected by colonial violence. Early Mexican accounts of La Llorona, like Manuel Carpio's 1849 poem, describe Rosalia, murdered and returning as a vengeful spirit. The Spanish brought the weeper. Mexico gave her reason to weep. By the late 1500s, Spanish priests were already recording indigenous accounts of a weeping woman near water, deliberately using the Spanish term Llorona to overwrite local names like Suicidal. Like a virus adapting to a new host, the legend absorbed elements from both cultures: water imagery from Aztec beliefs, romantic betrayal from Spanish traditions, and a new, terrifying addition: infanticide born from colonial desperation. The Spanish Lloronas wept for others. The Mexican Llorona weeps for what she herself has done, and for what was done to her. History provides us with a flesh and blood template for La Llorona's suffering. La Malinche, the Nahua woman who served as Hernán Cortés's translator, advisor, and eventually, mother of his child. Her life reads like a blueprint for the legend that would haunt generations. An indigenous woman, a Spanish conqueror, a child born between worlds. Then, abandonment. When Cortés no longer needed her, he married her off to another conquistador like surplus property. Their son Martín was sent to Spain, a child taken from his mother by colonial authority, never to return. Can you hear the parallels? Can you feel the weight of this betrayal echoing through centuries? La Malinche and La Llorona, both indigenous women discarded by Spanish men after fulfilling their purpose, both separated from their children. What does it truly mean to be betrayed by those to whom you've given everything? For both women, abandonment came with a price beyond emotional pain. In colonial Mexico, mixed-race children fathered by Spaniards who refused to acknowledge them faced brutal futures: exclusion, servitude, or worse. Some scholars suggest a darker interpretation of La Llorona's infanticide, not as mindless cruelty, but as desperate mercy. A mother's terrible calculation: is a quick death a better death than the slow torture of colonial subjugation? Is drowning gentler than what Spanish society had planned for these children? The betrayal in La Llorona's story isn't just personal, it's systemic. Like La Malinche, she represents collective trauma. Octavio Paz famously described La Malinche as Mexico's chingada, the violated mother of a nation born through conquest. La Llorona carries this same wounded DNA, her endless weeping a nation's unhealed wound. Her betrayal variants tell different aspects of colonial horror. Some versions portray her punished for choosing a Spanish lover, much like La Malinche was condemned by later generations. Others show her drowning mestizo children in protest of their father's abandonment. In each telling, the waters of grief rise higher, the wailing grows louder, the guilt spreads further. La Malinche lived and died. La Llorona never stops dying, or making others join her beneath the water. What we call La Llorona isn't a simple ghost story. She's a composite spectre, assembled from historical atrocities, ancient goddesses, colonial court records, and cultural collision. Her wails carry the echoes of drowning mothers, Suicidal's warnings, Spanish mourning rituals, and La Malinche's betrayal. As scholar Domino René Perez explains, this legend did more than frighten children away from waterways at night. It helped indigenous communities process unspeakable trauma through the familiar figure of a weeping mother, embodying grief too enormous to face directly. The true horror of La Llorona isn't in her ghostly appearance or the threat she poses to wandering children. It's in the colonial realities that birthed her, the system that forced women to choose between watching their children suffer or ending their suffering forever. So the next time you hear strange weeping near water after dark, remember, you're not just hearing a legend. You're hearing history's victims refuse to be silenced. You're hearing the drowned demanding to be remembered. You're hearing the consequence of conquest that no exorcism can banish. Because La Llorona isn't just coming for children. She's coming for your comfortable assumptions about the past.